First off, welcome panel members. Appreciate you all joining this discussion. We have one question here. My doctor has recommended bariatric vitamins. My stomach cannot tolerate the pills well. Is this common? Those bariatric vitamins are more for like daily values for people that need that extra support. Any thoughts on this?
We struggle to hear the question.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Bariatric vitamins, they're vitamins that give you extra due to like bariatric surgery and kind of the fat loss that happens with that. I think this person was recommended bariatric vitamins. Have you guys had experience with that or thoughts around vitamins and what to take?
I have not had any. Obviously, your doctor's recommending them, so he would like you to take them. I would say go back and talk with him about your issues and see if there's a smaller dose you can try or perhaps a different brand. We all know sometimes fillers are different and affect you differently. So, but definitely talk to your doctor about it.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else good experience with kind of vitamins and talking with your doctor about what vitamins to take other than what we heard today and yesterday?
No.
Okay.
No, we're good.
Okay. So one other question we have here is, how do I know which symptoms are PBC related and which may be caused by another illness or issue, i.e. heartburn, low back pain, plantar fasciitis, other aches and pains?
This is one of my pet peeve questions. And I always answer this and try and answer it on the website. Does my toe hurt? Does that have something to do with my liver? And I always say, go back to your doctor with all of your pains listed and tell him about them, because not only are you having PBC issues, but you're having autoimmune issues as well. It's a double plot being attacked, okay? It's your liver, but it's also your autoimmune. So it may be another autoimmune disease cropping up. So, what do you say?
I will add to that because there are issues that are very common to, symptoms that are very common to a lot of issues. Never should you write off something and say, I have to deal with this because I have PBC, and that's something that happens for PBC. It may not be from your PBC. So why would you just write it off and put up with it when bringing it up may find a real cause and something they could do to treat it? And then if they don't find anything else, then okay, it's PBC. But never suffer with something that you don't have to. The biggest thing you have to learn when you have PBC is how to open up your mouth and speak up for yourself, because that's the only way you're going to attention. It's not really the squeaky wheel, it's self-care. So, anyone else want to add? Are we good? And that was, do we have any more questions?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So one other question, which I think will be good from the panel's perspective, as far as how they work, how do you describe to others kind of how the difference between Urso and Ocaliva? I think Dr. Levy left that before she... Robert?
In terms of how they work, so ursodeoxycholic acid is synthetically made, but it's a natural compound, first off. It comes from bears, and bears never ever have gallstones, even when they hibernate. And this is partly to do with the fact that ursodeoxycholic acid is, they call it hydrophilic, which means it responds with water. And what it does is it keeps your bile thinner because it responds to the water part. Okay? Now, all your other biles, so I think there are 5 major biles within your list, and all the others are hydrophobic, so they don't respond with the water. So one of the best things you can do at a liver conference is if you get a panel like this of hepatologists, I dare you, ask them how Urso works. Because what you get is nobody wants the question, so they're not entirely sure. But in terms of what URSO does within the body, it does that. OCA is synthetically made also, but it's a synthetic chemical. So it's an invented chemical, whereas URSO is a reproduction of a natural chemical, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And it's hundreds, thousands of times more potent, so it's a much, much smaller dose. And that's as much as I know. Beyond that, you would need to go. Anybody from Intercept here?
Good point. Sandra, do you have
a comment? My understanding, ursodeoxycholic acid is the last of the 5 bile acids in human bile acid. It is, the bile acids are broken down as they go through your digestive system, and ursodeoxycholic acid is picked up in the colon and brought back in through the gut back to the liver. It's the least corrosive of the bile acids in your system. And as Robert was saying, it's the only one that's water soluble. The others are fat soluble. Mm-hmm. So the idea is by changing the balance of bile acids in your system, you're putting through the least corrosive and the most liquid of them to help stop corrosion from acid in your liver. And it also helps the flowing of bile acids into the digestive system. Ocaliva, on the other hand, stimulates a particular receptor in your digestive system that helps with, I'm trying to think of what it was it picks up. It's the FXR. Mm-hmm. And so they're similar. It's much more potent in the way it works, like orders of magnitude, at least 100 times. It does some of the same things that ursodeoxycholic acid would do, but at a much greater strength. That's the reason why, if you're responding to URSO, they don't really talk about giving you something extra. Go ahead.
Great.
Of course, I'm sitting here chuckling as we're explaining URSO. If you have any questions on URSO, see Tom, because Tom worked for the company that developed it. That's how we met Tom, and we've never let him go since then. So he's probably listening to our, patient explanations going, yeah, he's shaking his head, yes, so I guess we had it close. I had a much simpler explanation of how URSO worked. I was always like, people will say it thins your bile, and I always said it was the least caustic one. So we took that so that there would be less other biles. Mm-hmm. And I think Tom taught me this actually, less other biles produced. And so what was in there was the less damaging of it. So
nice. Good perspectives, though. I think it's good to hear that. One of the things, I'll go up and down the aisles a little bit, too, to see if there's any other questions. But, Cathy, I wanted you to comment, as you were listening to all the doctors speak today, all the experts in PBC, and yesterday as well, what kind of stood out to you? What was one of the topics that you said, huh, or aha?
So every conference that I've been to, I've learned something, and that's why you go, right? You may learn one thing, you might learn 20 things. I did hear things at this meeting that I've never heard before, and those are little nuggets that we'll capture and put on our website and share on our social media, and we'll look for, your contributions as well. The most fascinating to me personally was the radiology, because I understand my disease. My doctor tells me I know more about it than she does. I have to say she's right. But neither here nor there. Having an understanding of the screening processes that we go through, especially once you become stage 4, be it compensated or decompensated, understanding what they're looking for, what they're seeing, really helped me understand the effects of what's happening across our bodies. we know this is an autoimmune disease. It affects the liver, so they call it a liver disease. But an autoimmune disease is in your whole body. So what else is it doing? Is it doing anything else? Those are things that I took away from this meeting, are those little nuggets of that type of thing.
Great, thank you. We'll speckle in some of those across. Jean, I wanted to ask you a question real quick while we're on you. We had a member ask about, how do you manage energy levels?
Say that again?
How do you manage your energy levels?
Sometimes it's very hard, but I take. Can I talk about making my bed?
Sure. I talked about you going up the stairs.
I always call it my 3-hour procedure is to make my bed, because I also have lung disease, so I'm on oxygen as needed. And so I put my oxygen on, and I do a little bit of it, for about 10 minutes. Then I go into the living room, sit down in my chair. And
Okay.
it's become a real chore to make my bed. And it's not 3 hours, but I call it that because it seems like it. And I have to make it with oxygen on. Because PBC is not just the one autoimmune disease that I have. I have 17. And I know she's told me, don't brag. I'm not keeping count. Honest, I'm not keeping count.
Okay.
I'm not trying to win this game, but it's my lungs, it's my kidneys, it's my liver, and the autoimmune system. Again, I'm going to go back to it again. I'm sorry, but it is attacking your whole body.
Good point. Yeah.
And so if you've got a pain, it's not your liver, it's your cotton picking toe that's got it. Yeah, I hate to see that on the internet, but yeah. So the energy level is in bits and pieces.
Sure.
I break it down in bits and pieces
Good way
and
to
do
manage.
what I can the day that I can. And I also take a 5-minute nap when my system tells me to. Because when your system is saying you are tired, you have to listen to what your body's telling you.
Great. And Sandra, what about you? Thoughts on how you manage energy levels?
I'm pretty lucky. I have early stage disease. I was diagnosed 18 years ago, and it has not progressed. I actually have more energy now than I did at the time I was diagnosed. Ursodiol did things for me that everybody says, I can't do that for you. And it's like, yeah, it can. I do try to get a moderate amount of exercise every day. I try to walk about 2 miles a day. And I try to keep the tasks that are going to burn energy to the time of day that I have it. Mm-hmm. So my husband has learned he better ask for elaborately cooked meals, like Sunday noon.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare for it to happen for dinner on a weeknight.
Sure.
Cooked meals, what are those?
Robert, I think you wanted to touch on this or the conference?
I could do both, but as we're on energy. So first off, my caveat, I do not have PBC, okay? I've met a few people that have. First, a question that I'm going to put to you. I'm going to ask you to think about all the people that you've known, who you've admired, who have inspired you, who you've loved and lost. Have any of them sat you down and said, you know what? Just before I take my mortal coil, I need to sit you down because I really wish I'd cleaned my kitchen cupboards more often. Pick your fights. The key thing is to invest your energy. Invest it in something that's going to give you something back, emotionally, psychologically, and physically. manage what you're doing, but do what you love. Singing, pushing the kids on the, whatever it is that you love that's going to give you a feedback, and it will change you over the period of time, long term. The data shows, and I'm going to look at you, Gail, for data, that the more you can do without running a marathon, just step by step, piece by piece, doing stuff that you love. And this goes back to what Leslie said earlier. It's absolutely the key.
Great. Yeah, and Gail, it'd be great to get your perspective on kind of, as our global visitor, what's your thoughts on this conference and some of the things that really stood out to you?
Well, the conference is great. I was at the one in 2018 in Houston, loved it. I love being in a room with PBC patients. I am one myself, and I just find it inspiring because everybody, I think it was like one of the first slides, and it's been repeated, that we all have different journeys. So I really like that. I find it very encouraging and supportive. No matter where you are, you're not where somebody else is, but we can talk about it. So I think it's great. I wanted to add to what Robert was saying about energy levels and wellness, because really what Leslie was saying is, I think stress is one of the largest things that saps energy. So when we start getting negative thoughts or feeling bad or feeling anxious about anything in our life, but okay, let's say our disease, but anything, the fate of our children, the fate of the world, politics, all of the things that we get stressed about causes a further burden on our energy and our disease, really. And we've worked with coaches like Leslie to develop programs on wellness, and we've actually got some research results that we presented last year at the European Liver Meeting, and we found that people's energy level significantly increases when they participate in a program of mindfulness, some physical movement. It doesn't have to be, in a gym, as we used to say. It can be chair yoga. It can be breathwork exercises, meditation, yoga, anything that gets you moving. Go for a walk. We found that people in a program doing 12 weeks of this type of program, all their scores improve. So I think probably everyone here is, I hope, aware of like the PBC 40, which is one of the tests where they check all the domains of. How many people are aware of PBC 40? None. Okay, so PBC 40 is one of the questionnaires that they developed, I think, with the UK Foundation early on, many years ago, to judge how we're doing with PBC emotionally, physically. So it has itch on it. It's got fatigue. It's got social isolation. It's got what is it? You know more than me.
Yeah, so.
Let Robert tell you about that. But it's cool.
So there's the PBC 40, there's its smaller brother now, the PBC 10, but it's a quality of life study, and it's just to ask you, how do you feel about, so are you embarrassed with your itch? Do you have to cancel appointments? Where are you with your symptoms? Where are you emotionally? And all of those kind of things. And what that does is give you a picture. And a bit like what Leslie was saying earlier, in terms of it builds your awareness of what you can then work on. Because if you know that actually I'm cancelling more appointments because I'm embarrassed about my itch, then you can start to address that. If I'm not going out on a Saturday night to my friends because I'm knackered, I think is the technical PBC term. But, if you're exhausted, then again, that's something for you to focus on and really build and improve. And so the PBC 40 or the 10 is a great tool to build your awareness, and it also can inform your conversations with your HCP. And somebody here, I think it was yourself, Jean, that, prepare for your appointment with your doctor. Go in with your stuff ready. And so if you know how you are and where you are, that then colors your conversation and makes it much more powerful and much more productive.
Awesome.
I always am telling people, because virtually when you talk to your doctor, they're going to tell you, well, you're tired, get more exercise. And in your brain, you're like, but I'm tired. Why are you telling me? But we have it in our mind that exercise means a program. It means you go out and do it. my explanation of exercise is you're doing 5 minutes more of physical activity than you did yesterday. And I tell this even to my 96-year-old mother, because she just fell and she's trying to get herself back together. I can't do it, Carol. I'm just so tired. And I said, well, guess what? If you lay there, you're going to stay tired. So I was challenging her as I was leaving, and I said, Mom, when I come back, I want to sit here and I want to watch you turn to the side and drop your legs over the side of the bed. That's your exercise program for this week. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I'll try.
Oh, did you have something, Kathy?
Yeah. As someone who has had the joy of severe fatigue from before I got diagnosed, I have learned pacing,
Right.
doing what you can do when you can. And the more you can plan that, and forgive yourself if you can't do it.
Right.
And don't beat yourself up because you can't.
You have to be good to yourself.
Absolutely. The other thing I wanted to raise was I also have itch. So having itch means I don't sleep well. And not sleeping well makes my fatigue worse. So which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Or the domino effect.
Right, exactly. So treating my itch has helped with my fatigue because I'm getting better sleep. So talk with your doctors about your symptoms and make sure that you're addressing those quality of life issues that you're dealing with. Exercise is counterintuitive. You're tired, you don't want to get up and do it. You'll have more energy if you do.
Awesome. And I had a question around I know some of the group here have considered clinical trials, and obviously we have a lot of sponsors here that are doing clinical trials that were discussed. How did you or do you kind of analyze what, to consider a clinical trial or not? What goes in your mind, and what would you recommend talking with your doctor about? Who wants to go first?
Sandra.
Strong feelings.
Whoa, strong feelings coming.
Okay.
If you want your disease to be cured, you need to participate. There aren't very many of us, so that means a higher proportion of us need to participate. If you can't participate in a clinical trial, I can't because I'm too healthy. So I'm always excluded from clinical trials. So I participate in all the investigational studies that I can get into. At one point, Dr. Gershwin joked that he had so much of my blood, he could list it by the month and year that
Wow.
he had collected it, because I would go every time and go give him blood. So I feel like if you want the disease to be cured, and you want to make sure that that cure represents you, you ought to make sure that you're being represented in the studies. It's that simple.
Okay, and I also have strong feelings. Agreeing with her in her trials, but I don't want anyone who physically can't do it, whether it's too hard, too far. I will say that the trials have now become more patient-friendly, and they're making more of an effort to bring them to you, so there's not this distance. So don't assume you can't participate. If you have an inkling you want to, talk to them, volunteer. Maybe in the end you won't be able to, but if you can't participate in this one, you might be able to participate. But there's one thing you all can do, and that's put your information in the registry. You don't have to go anywhere but home. You can mail it in. You can do it on the computer. But think of the awesome comparison from all of our combined health histories. And that's why we formed the registry. That's where they're able to go in and compare apples to apples instead of, for years the organization did a whole lot of surveys, and we got wonderful information. But there was no way to compare this survey to that survey because it it was done the simple way that we knew how to do, and we hadn't learned enough to start doing it a little more professionally, and that it would be actually helpful to research. So that's why we've done it. I was never able to participate in a trial because I was diagnosed already in cirrhosis, and they didn't want to touch you. Now that I've achieved the wonderful status, and first, is there a show of hands? Is there anybody in here who has been transplanted? I am the only one here, right?
Good work.
So I'm hoping they're going to start looking at some things that they want to find out about transplant, and I'm going to be the first one in line. So. Transplant, our clinical trial expert.
Not. I happen to live, or did live, close enough to Dr. Gershwin's lab to, like Sandra, hustle up to Davis because Dr. Gershwin needed warm blood for his trial.
Yeah.
Now, you think, warm blood? What does it matter? Well, in his research, it did.
Yeah.
They literally took our blood, took it upstairs to the lab, and worked through the night with it. So when Dr. Gershwin put out the call, there we went. It's not the same kind of clinical trial that you may think of with a pharmaceutical agent, right? This is taking blood to do analysis on theories of what's causing, PBC, or how they can identify biomarkers, all of these other things that they do in genius worlds of research. Mm-hmm. There are many opportunities to participate in research beyond going through a clinical trial where you try an investigational drug.
Good point. How do you find out about those, or how did you find out?
Okay, so we get the lead in that I love. If you go to our website, we have a list of all the clinical trials that are currently open. And you can click on it, click on the name, and it'll take you to what we call the landing page of that trial's information. So it'll explain what the criteria is, what they're hoping to do, and how you can enroll. Or if you're really into the weeds, you can go to www.clinicaltrials.gov. Type in the word PBC, press search. It will give you a list of all the trials. Now, you can exclude ones that are closed or ones that aren't enrolling yet or what have you. And you can get down to a reasonable number of ones to look through. Scroll to the bottom of the page, and you'll find out where the centers are. So Dr. Levy would show up on the list. Dr. Bolus will show up on the list. If you don't recognize anyone in the area near you, you can contact the original contact from the pharma company, and they can then refer you to whoever's doing one. And we added a widget on our homepage for a company called Antidote. And Antidote matches patients with clinical trials. And it's anonymous until you sign up for the trial. So you go in, you put some basic information in, and they say, well, you might qualify for this trial. If you're interested, we can take this further. Then they go through a screening process and would refer you. So feel free to examine that, look around, and by all means, ask. Ask your doctor about clinical trials. Ask your fellow patients about investigational trials. They have lots of information that you can grab at a click of a mouse.
Great.
Last resort, call us. Mm-hmm. We're always happy to talk to you.
Nice.
And we're on the website, too.
And the ending of that is, take it even if you're unsure. Take it as far as you want to, because until you actually finish working with them, get down right to the point of giving your signed consent, you just have to say, okay, I've decided no. But don't say no before you know all the possibilities. Investigate it, check it out. Because we're the only way that it's going to happen is with us helping. They're not going to spend all this time and effort trying to help patients who don't want to help themselves.
Great.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I just took a trial, I guess, and I got paid $100. And the check's going to be in the mail when I get home. So it's worth it to you if you want to donate that $100 back to PBC. There's another site that I get in mind. Guess what it is? Autoimmune issues. So, don't just search for PBC. Get out there and do your homework. Remember, the ERS at the end of PBC, ERS, is education, research, and support. And it begins with you.
Awesome. And Gail, did you have kind of like nuances too of your own analysis or your thoughts around that as well?
No, I agree with what everybody else said. We have Antidote on our website. Of course, we face a few different challenges because we have a different country, and so different things are on trial in our country. But, patients should seek it out and participate. I totally agree that this is the way we find more and better treatments. With proof. So this is the scientific proof of safety and efficacy. So the reason why you might take these pills or the placebo is to make sure these things are safe and that they work. This is like ideal, right? Because then we have options. So treatment options are the goals. So I started on URSO, and they said, if you don't respond to this, there's no other treatment for you. I bet lots of you had that experience. It's heartbreaking. What do you mean there's nothing else I can take? No, there's nothing else you can take. Good luck. Like, why bother doing the blood work? Because there's nothing else you can take. So I think getting more treatment options is the goal. And now we have 2 treatment options for PBC itself, the first line and the second line. And let's have some more, because not everybody does well on all of these. So I think it's essential.
Great. Robert, I think you have some comments?
So I think partnership is key. So can I ask all the industry partners to raise their hands? Anyone still in the room? Okay? You don't have the answers. You have the questions. Can I ask all the people with PBC in the room to raise their hands? You are the answer. You have the knowledge. You are the solution. We did data recently that said only 4% of PBC patients are given the opportunity to take part in clinical trials. And this is where you come in. So again, as Carol said, never ever feel pressured. But if you are facing an unmet need, you have an incredible opportunity to be the answer.
Great.
Power's yours.
Good point. I think you have a question?
Well, I was going to say, they don't do it enough, but your hospitals also, or your healthcare systems may reach out to you as well. And if you're next to a research hospital or something, I happen to be a Duke patient, and I received some information from Duke about a drug trial. And I've looked at different times in my life, but I probably wouldn't have linked in to try the drug trial if I hadn't gotten a flyer in the mail. And I want to be on the front lines of trying to solve some of the issues that I have, because I know other people are suffering like I do.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. We have a question here on brain fog, so I'll let you guys choose who wants to answer it first. But as far as brain fog and kind of the unique to PBC characteristics, how can that be differentiated from family members with dementia characteristics? How do you kind of help?
I liken it to a few years ago, my husband's mother lived with us, and I loved her as much as I loved my mom. I met her when I was just a teenager, so I've known her all my life. And having her live with us was a joy. It was never a burden. The one thing that used to make me laugh is I'd go with her to her doctor's appointments. And they'd say, so how are you doing? You feeling okay? Yeah, I'm fine. No, I have no complaints. Well, except that, so she used to call me her brain. And shortly after she passed away, which was 3 years ago now, I've noticed that I'm having more brain fog. I don't remember words that I should know, right? Things just are not there. And it's really frustrating. But she had dementia, and it affected everything all the time. My brain fog doesn't affect me all the time. I'm speaking here, hopefully coherently. But I feel like it's getting worse because there's more things I'm forgetting. And I'm a very verbal person. So not having words to express myself is disconcerting. So in my next appointment, I'll be discussing that with my doctor. I think that's the clear difference of brain fog and dementia. Brain fog is affected sometimes by fatigue for patients. If you're tired, it could be worse. So kind of keep an eye on it. Maybe keep a log for a week or two and see what might be correlating. If you're having memory issues all the time, that might be, early signs of some senility, which we all come to when we get older. Or it could be brain fog. But again, you have the answers. You just need to know the questions to ask.
So one of the first things when I started learning about PBC was you knew you definitely had it when you learned how to correctly pronounce and spell gastroenterologist. But the other thing was, and I still cannot to this day say it, H-E, okay. And I said, and so people will think that's what they're getting. There's a big difference between brain fog and that. We'll call it that because I still can't say it. And you watch the reaction to this. I've never had it. And these two will chuckle because leading up to my transplant, I guess there were some very strange Zoom meetings that they got off the meetings and were like, oh my God. So apparently I did have it and not really realize it, but I didn't really have the brain fog. In the very beginning when I was very tired, and that's when I noticed it most, was when I was tired and wasn't sleeping enough. I just thought of it as part of the tiredness, but it really was that. So, and Jean?
Why'd you pass it to you, Jean?
These are easier questions, Tom. My mother-in-law died with Alzheimer's, and my mother is currently in a nursing home, assisted living home, and she's 94 and has dementia plus cancer, but, she's doing good. She's hanging in there, let's put it that way. My brother is in the Army, and the side of the helicopter that he was flying in hit the side of the mountain, and this big, huge ball of metal rolled down the side of the mountain. They all got out, but he has brain damage and dementia and is in the psych ward at, the Oklahoma VA hospital. He wanted to come back and live with me a couple years ago because he wanted to be with Mom, he wanted to be with me, and he wanted me to take care of him. And I said, no, I have my hands full with Mom. So, yeah, I can talk about brain fog. And I'm like Cathy. I've been, not remembering some words that should be right there on the end of my tongue. So brain fart, brain fog, I don't care what you call it, it's there.
It's also called aging.
Aging.
Everything.
She says it's aging. Yes, again.
There is some Canadian study by Dr. Mark Swain in Alberta that did imaging of PBC patients' brain, and he found that there are differences. So he has a cool presentation called "It's All in Your Head." PBC, it's all in your head. So try to look that up. It's Dr. Mark Swain, his imaging on PBC patients' brain.
What was the question? No, so what I wanted to share with you was one of the PBC days years ago, we did something called Hands Up for PBC. And some of you may remember this. And this was about the tiredness and the brain fog and everything. And what we asked was, we asked patients, caregivers, we had clinicians, we had industry people all recording their video. And we said, we're asking you to speak for 1 minute on whatever you know about PBC with your hands raised high. Okay, I've got a microphone, so I can't do both. But what happened, what we saw was, first off, people that didn't have PBC had their hands here. And people who did have PBC started with their hands there, which was interesting in its own right. But what would happen is when the fatigue started to kick in with the hands up in the air, so they'd be talking very sensibly, very eloquently, very much in a control factor, and then their arm would drop and they would, so I was talking about, and every time the arm dropped, they lost their way in the sentence, which was absolutely fascinating. But what it did was it allowed non-PBC people to experience that fatigue and the correlation with losing your way in your mind and your cognition. It was immensely powerful.
I have a question around empathy and, dealing with some of the physicians that may not understand PBC as well as others. How do you help them understand, for you or for others, about what you're going through, and making sure, even family members, how do you help them understand what you go through?
I have no empathy for it, no.
What was that?
I said I have no empathy for it. I'm only kidding.
No empathy, yeah.
But one of the big things is you have to consider to begin with that not every doctor is going to know everything about something like PBC. And that's fine. You go to a doctor, you get diagnosed with something. To me, that doctor has an ethical responsibility to admit his abilities. If he wants to educate himself about PBC and work with you, and if you've had a long-time physician, that's going to happen. You're the patient. And if they aren't able or unwilling, then they need to refer you to where you need to go. You don't continue to see a doctor who doesn't know about your disease enough to treat you. You move to somebody. But you don't just, and everybody's like, I could say, oh, my doctor is the best. And if Jean went to my doctor, he's not the best for her, because there's a very personal interaction with your doctors. I hear countless times, you got to see a hepatologist. You got to see. There's so many places in this country that you don't have easy access to a hepatologist. I went through my entire 26 years of PBC treatment with a local GI doc. And he knew patients. He knew right away after other people weren't able to figure out. He knew what was wrong. And, of course, he had to tell me I was at stage 4, and I'm like, well, that's the end, and that's the really sick people, And he said, well, what I can tell you is we'll treat it as it goes, and we'll treat any symptoms from cirrhosis that pop up until we can't, and then we move on. And unfortunately, we got to the day where he had to look at me and say, this is all I can do for you. We need to go there, with tears rolling down his cheeks. So, you don't randomly just fire your doctor because you don't like what they said or they didn't know. But if they're willing to work with you and learn, then work on that relationship. Otherwise, yes, look somewhere else. But don't just call them stupid. Don't think they don't know anything because they didn't know that much about PBC. of all the things in the world, how much do you think fits in their brains? You know, you have to respect, and like I said, that's what my opinion is. Fine, it's fine that you don't know, but be truthful about it. Don't continue or pretend to treat it. Do it right or pass you along.
Yeah. Sandra, I think you had a, sorry.
I second what Carol has to say. I've had 4 hepatologists and 3 gastroenterologists. 1 HEPA was great, 2 HEPAs were mediocre, and 1 was an abomination to the practice of medicine.
How do you really feel?
How do I really feel? I mean, this is a guy that looked at me 4 years into a PBC diagnosis, had my whole record in front of him, says, "You look too healthy to have PBC." And he was the transplant coordinator for the particular practice I was going to. I fired that sucker so fast. Because remember who works for whom? You
Good
know,
point.
your doctor is working for you, and you need to have a relationship of mutual respect. All 3 of my gastroenterologists I've loved, they've all been fine. Granted, I'm early stage disease. I don't need to work with a surgeon at this point in my life, and I hope I never need to. I'm going to leave those for people who are sicker than me.
Great. Gail?
Yeah, I am always concerned how to get empathy from our family members and friends. And, you know, as women, I think we take on a lot of roles and responsibilities that feel failure if we give up. So who's making Thanksgiving dinner? Who's making holidays and all these parties for the kids and the family members? And so what I've learned from being around a lot of PBC patients is successful ones throw away convention. So order pizza for Thanksgiving. What's more important, having the turkey or having the family? So making these choices around fatigue and, you know, how much you can handle. I know, like, even for myself, and I am also early stage disease and I have lots of energy. After a family dinner, I need like 2 days off. I'm exhausted. It could be age. I mean, I don't know if it could be age, but I think being kind to yourself is asking, so this is the empathy part, asking your family members to understand that you need their help. Sometimes that's really hard. You know, can you bring the stuffing? Can you bring the broccoli or whatever? And I've been doing that, and the kids are really happy to actually be asked. They feel like they're helping you. That's actually a good feeling for someone else, letting them feel empathetic to you. As actually just as important as teaching your kids how to read and write and sending them to school and all the sports that we put them through and all the activities, you know, teaching them to be empathetic is us asking. So I think it's kind of helps us and helps our older children evolve into good adults. So ask for help. That's my...
Good point. Robert?
So as the son of somebody with PBC, it's a really, really interesting question. And I think we become jaded in your condition, if that makes sense. Because particularly if you're growing up, Mum's always tired. Yeah. She's tired again. So it becomes the norm. So when you're really tired, that still sits within the norm, if that makes sense. And I think, so I always say, to patients in particular, the 2 big days of your life are the day you're diagnosed and then the day you meet other patients. Because you don't see horns and tails and, you know, it's normal people doing the best they can with the condition. But as caregivers, when you're in a room, okay, and your mum's saying to you, "I'm so tired, it feels like I'm walking through custard." And then some random person you've never met before from 17 states across the country goes, "Honestly, some days I feel like I'm walking through custard." And then the caregiver kind of goes, and suddenly it validates your journey and it gives the caregiver a much deeper sense of understanding that actually it is real. And again, it's that inspiration to be a better partner,
Great.
family. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah, thank you. And that's kind of like do we have other on empathy?
Yeah, a brief.
Okay.
To kind of add on to what Robert just said, if possible, get your spouse, your children, those that are close to you, your best friend, involved in your disease. Get them to understand the disease. Education's a wonderful way to build that empathy so that, as Robert very eloquently said, it validates that. Because you saying it means nothing. Know that up front, automatic. It's dismissed. It's all in our head. I drug my husband to Dr. Gershwin's meeting. He sat there, he came back, and he goes, okay, I have questions. He gets it. Now he comes with me to those meetings. So find that person in your support network that you can tap to be that person that really understands your disease with you. And it will help both of you. And it bleeds out to everyone else in your circle.
Yeah.
So to that, I had the wonderful task of attempting to find someone to be the moderator of our family and friends session. Our original moderator was Jean's husband, and he did a wonderful job. And I've had to live up to those standards. So this year, as we were coming up to it, I asked Liz if she would come because I thought this was the first opportunity to have someone actually with medical knowledge that could answer some of the questions that the family members might have that they truthfully don't want to ask in front of their wife, even if they go to it, or, family members. And so she said, well, what exactly, is this? And I said, I've never been in it. I'm not allowed. That's a private session. I said, and it kind of goes depending on who attends. It's a chance for you. I said, basically, you're there, that if there's nobody wanting to speak up, you kind of coax it out of them. And if there's the one person who doesn't want to stop talking, you stop them and get the interaction. I said, so I hope everyone had a really wonderful time yesterday. I thought it was going to be a great opportunity with Liz there. But we also, on the day-to-day, we have several options. We have a Facebook page that is specifically just a private Facebook page specifically for friends and family. There's no patients in there. So you can talk with each other and ask questions or vent if you need to. We also have a written version for those that don't like to do Facebook on Groups.io, just designed for friends and family to be in. And it's an everyday source. It's not really very active sometimes. And people say, of course it's not active. Men aren't going to go in there. We don't do that. I said, well, the opportunity is there, and I'd love to see more people in it and start using it, because there is the day when you're going to have to vent. You're just going to have to. I can tell you, my husband, this past year before my transplant, he was trying to get me to the series of evaluation tests, and he came in the room several times. We're going to be late for the dentist appointment. Why are you not ready? I'm like, okay, what time do we have to be there? Comes back in. You're not dressed. I said, I can't find my pants as I was holding them in my hand. So during the whole process, and of course then they called me and told me my blood work was off and I needed to get to ER yesterday. And the doctor, he said, I was going to make sure I took her tomorrow because she's acting kind of funny. And this doctor was not real tactful. He said, your wife would not have been alive tomorrow. She would not have woken up. And from that point on, my husband was permanently attached to me. I couldn't get away from anything. He felt still guilty, but he had no way of knowing that that's what he needed to do.
Nice.
So he actually ended up venting to our son-in-law, who he does not like.
Yeah. In kind of in our last 5 minutes, Sandra, if you could kick us off and just kind of your last kind of takeaway or your aha moment from the meeting and some of the speakers, so we can kind of have this round robin here and just what are you taking home away? Or what would you recommend those that are going to watch this on video to go back and look at?
Well, for me, this is, I think, my 7th conference. So I most enjoyed, I got the most new information from some of the pharma presentations, the new medications,
Okay.
as well as, but I thought the most fun presentation was the radiologist. That was quite interesting. We had not had one of those before in my knowledge.
Nice.
So.
Gail, what's your takeaway?
I liked hearing Dr. Gershwin. I found that he sort of, I felt like he was like all over. Like I felt like he had this mind that was like on a TV show where he's having all these synapses and he sees a thing over there and then he sees like House or something and he sees a thing over there. And so I thought, wow, that is very interesting. And I think that maybe, the future of where we find cures is more in the autoimmune stream, as Jean said. So yeah, I think that was my takeaway.
Thank you. So this is my 3rd conference, so thank you for having me back. I think the key message for me, I think there are 2. One is where you are in your journey will dictate what you take away from the conference. So if you're newly diagnosed, there's certain questions that you have and all of those kind of things. So I would strongly recommend come back again, because the E is for education. And going back to the previous question, if you don't know more than your doctor, we've let you down. So please, use that as an opportunity. And my takeaway was from Cynthia, because she highlighted the power of the patient voice. When we come together and we speak together, we change stuff. And that's my takeaway.
Awesome. Jean, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I got a big comment.
Uh-oh.
I brought a young lady with me today that was a good friend of my mother's, and I had not met her. And my mother, she went and visited with my mother, and she was kind of venting with her. And she says, I've got to have some lab work done, and I don't know what it means. And it has to do with my liver. And I don't know what to do. And my mother said, I know what you need to do. You need to talk to my daughter. And so, Charlene called me, and she said, hi, this is Charlene. I said, oh, hi, this is Jean. We had never met. And so she says, I have to have a liver panel. And she says, your mom said to call you. And I said, well, what type of liver panel, what are they looking at? And she says, autoimmune hepatitis or something like that. And I said, okay, well, you're in the beginnings of it. I said, go back and finish it, and then call me back and we'll talk about it. So that's what we did, and that's what she did. And then she called back and she says, I have PBC. She didn't know what it was. And so I've been mentoring her. She was diagnosed about 8 or 9 months ago, and I've been mentoring her through it. So, when I said there's going to be a conference, I'm with you. I'm going. So it was a big thing for me. I'm seeing this through Charlene's eyes.
Nice.
I'm asking her what she's getting. But I did notice one thing. I've been to all 15 of the conferences in one form or another, and finally, we got Eric Gershwin to admit that it has something to do with hormones. After all, do you see the women that are involved? So, once you pay attention, you will hear something, just even if it's a kernel.
Awesome.
It will apply to you. And keep helping those out there that are coming along behind you. Because, we've been here a long time, and, these faces are looking a little older. Because he's been with us for a long time. So, and hang in there. If you're new, or if you've been here 15, 17 years, doesn't make any difference. Doesn't make any difference. You still have empathy, and you saw how the empathy question went from mom, went to doctors, Carol, at home. Empathy can go anywhere and everywhere. It really can.
True.
And we have to deal with a little bit of schmaltz out there,
Cathy, Carol, you guys want to wrap things up?
Yeah, I'm actually going to take the time to thank these people who had, Jean and Sandra have been dealing with this a long time. They also have been in charge of organizing these conferences long before I was. And then I came on and joined with them. Cathy, the same. Robert and Gail, I'm glad to have your perspective as part of this. I'd also like to acknowledge that wonderful team of volunteer worker bees that have gone. Leslie's also on our, maybe I have brain fog right now. Leslie's on our committee, but it's all volunteer. It's organized over phone calls and emails. And this one in particular has been a very long time in coming. Yeah. As part of, and what's amazing to me about the PBCers is I have all those who had originally were supposed to be working, but I think almost everyone has come up and said, what can I do to help? So really you all were part of making this a success. My last thing would be when you leave, if you want to pick up that hand sanitizer bottle and deposit it at the back, and if you're into recycling, that name badge you have on, the plastic part of it, and the lanyard has probably attended another PBC conference in its life. If there's a basket back there, if you want to drop them in. If you're attached to it, feel free to keep it as a memory, that's fine. But if you're just going to throw it away, we'd rather have it back there. So I thank you all for coming. I hope to see all your faces at another forum of meeting. We're going to work really hard on expanding our local area things so that you don't have to wait for the big conference. It'll be obviously a smaller scale, but you'll still get all that interaction and good information. So thank you all so much for coming, although I'm assuming you're all going to eat dinner, so we're just going to party tonight, okay? And I promise I won't cry and make you finish reciting the words on the poem for me tonight. But I appreciated that because I also couldn't see and I couldn't speak. So thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Carol. And yeah, I think if we can just turn kind of the wrap-up slides up there as well. Are they under here? You guys can. Yeah, if you got, thank you all for the participation today. We appreciate you answering those questions.